Okay, good morning. We are learning Leila Nishmas Mendel Mariam Bas Kamad Ruven Hana Shamash Aliyah. We are up to Kuf Nun Aleph Amud Beis. Kol Asuye Mai. Yes, Kol Asuye Mai. So if you recall, the Mishnah spoke about the fact that you're allowed to attend to all the needs of the deceased. Kol tzorchei hames, all the needs of the deceased. Then it gives a couple of examples. So whenever the Mishnah does that, we always have to ask. If it says, what it should say is, you could take care of the needs of the dead, of the deceased, and then it gives examples. But when it says, that makes sense. But it says you can take care of all the needs, and then it gives particular examples. The word all must be coming to include something that's not listed, or else there would be no reason to use the word all, right? The authors of the Mishnah are going to be extremely, extremely precise. So ask the Mishnah, ask the Gemara, Kol Asuyei Mai. When it said to do all the needs of the deceased, what does that include? Why is this thing going sideways? Sorry. Okay. Lasuye hadatan rabbanan, to include the following, that was taught in the following brisa. Nevi'in kli mekar ukli matachos. Person's allowed to bring cooling vessels and metal vessels. Umanichan al kreso, and are placed in the corpse's stomach. Kadesh lo tipoch, so that the stomach does not swell. Okay, so what that means is that, again, bodies are typically left out. There's no morgue, there's no fridge, there's no cool places. So one of the areas that they're most concerned about was that the stomach is going to swell and potentially open up, which would be obviously very big bizarre, a big disgrace for the deceased, and therefore what they would do is they would take vessels that are cold, things that for whatever reason, maybe they're sitting in water, whatever it is, and place them on the stomach in order to ensure that it maintains like some level of refrigeration, at least especially in that area, because that's an area where the potential disgrace would be significant. Okay, ufokin as the kavav, you're allowed to stop up the orifices, kadesh lo tikanas ben ruach, so that air does not enter them. Basically, more of an airflow within any of their orifices is going to be something which would cause them to decompose faster. V'af Shlomo amar b'chachma, so when Shlomo said in his wisdom, ad asher lo yirasek chevel hakesef. Okay, so Shlomo HaMelech is talking about like the end of life and things that happen to the body. We're going to discuss this pasuk more later. And he says, before the silver rope snaps. What's the silver rope? Zeh chuta shidra. This is the spinal cord. In other words, when a person dies or a person gets older, the things that start to decompose or fall apart. Okay, so that refers to the spinal cord. V'taretz gulas hazav. And the golden bowl is shattered. Zeh ama. There's a reference to the male organ. V'tishaver ba kad ala mabua. And the pitcher is broken at the fountain. Zeh hakeres. This is the stomach which could break open. V'naro tagam. We're really focusing on these last words, that the pitcher is broken at the fountain. There's a reference to the stomach, which is a pitcher, like a pitcher holds on to substance. Similarly, our intestines, they hold on to things. V'naro tagalgel as a bar. And the wheel is smashed at the pit. Zeh perish. This is a reference to excrements. V'narot galgal, although galgal means wheel, the word galal without the gimel means excrements. This is a reference to excrement. V'chenu omer v'zarisi perish al panechem perish chagechem. Similarly, the pasuk states in Malachi that I'll scatter excrement on your faces. It's like God is cursing the Jewish people. I'm going to scatter excrement on your faces, the excrement of your festivals. Okay. Bottom line is, we'll come back to that second pasuk we saw in a moment. But the bottom line is that this pasuk, which Shlomo Melech describes death, where things start to fall apart after death, and one of the things that's described is that the wheel is smashed at the pit, and what that means is that there's going to be that the excrement is something which is potentially going to kind of come out of the body after death. If the body starts to decompose, there's still excrement in the body. The excrement start coming out, and therefore one of the things we do is we cool the body, we close the orifices to ensure that doesn't happen, because again that would be a great bizayon, a great disgrace for the mace. Amar Rav Huna v'Amar la Amar Rav Chaga. Elu b'nei Adam shemanichin divrei Torah ve'osen kol yimei v'chagim. This last pasuk in Malachi is a reference to people who ignore the words of Torah and all their days are festivals. All their days are basically just enjoyment. Okay, Amar Rav Levi, Amar Rav. So that's that. Then Hashem is saying to those people, I'll scatter excrement on your face, the excrement of your festivals. Meaning, you make every day into a festival. Hashem's saying you're gonna have a punishment for that. Amar Rabbi Levi, Amar Papi, Amar Rabbi Yeshua la'achar shlosh yamim. 3 days after a person dies, kreisum nifkas mefeles al panav. A person's stomach bursts. If a person is not buried, or their stomach, or they're not refrigerated, then their stomach could burst, and excrement that was inside will like kind of ooze down to their face. Vomerislo, and so to speak, say to the individual, Tol mashon asatibi, take back what you put in me. Okay, pretty harsh words, but the idea is that a person who indulges too much, they have all this waste, and the waste basically goes back into the mouth, saying like, you wasted your life. No pun intended. You waste your life, and that's the idea behind this. This for people who spend their day in self-indulgence. Okay, now we're going to get into some important halachos. All important halachos, but halachos which are sometimes debated by modern society, and that is ema atzmas ames b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to close the eyes of the dead on Shabbos. Okay, so you're not allowed to close the eyes of the dead on Shabbos, meaning after a person dies, you can't go ahead and close their eyes. They're muksa, there's no reason to close their eyes, and therefore you cannot do it. But he adds, v'lo bechol im yitzias nefesh. Similarly, on a weekday, when a person is in the process, a person is at the moment of death, meaning they're kind of wavering at that moment, you're not allowed to close their eyes. V'matzim im yitzias nefesh, a person closes the eyes of someone who is dying. Okay, someone who's dying, harizeh shofech damim. That person is a murderer. Okay, so what's being said over here is that a person who is on the cusp of passing, their life is in the is hanging by they're almost passing, and a person goes ahead and closes their eyes, as we're going to see in the Gemara. Like we're going to say, like you basically just hasten their death. You basically they're going to die a second later, and you brought it a little bit closer. You are a murderer if you do so, right? So we're very, very careful. We typically halachically we wait. If a person passes with their eyes open, we wait a little while before we start closing the eyes. It's possible that they've lost consciousness at that point, whatever it is. And we're very careful not to close the eyes because we don't want to bring death closer even by a moment, because in doing so that is murder according to halacha. In general society we have there's a concept. I've just this past week, a number of conversations with people in hospice care and hospitals. The person's not, they're not responsive, they're not doing anything, et cetera, and therefore, like, why are you doing this? Just like, let's give them morphine and move the process along. And that is murder. That's murder according to halacha. Any way, even a second, is something which we consider murder. Certainly, a person go ahead and say to a person who is, is not fully functional, to say that we should therefore go ahead and speed up the process. Is shvichas dam. It's murder. Okay. Tanar Banan. It's Tanar Braysa. Ma'atzmo imitzias nefesh harizeh shovech dam. A person who closes the eyes of a dying person in the moment of death is a murderer. Mashla ner shekava ve'olechas. It's like a flame of a candle that's flickering and about to go out. Okay. Adam maniach etzbo alem yad kafsa. Person puts their finger on that candle, it goes out. Similarly, a person touches and closes the eyes. And the truth is the halacha that we see elsewhere, and that's where they have over here in the article, that we see elsewhere that a person who is in that moment, any like jarring touches, so closing the eyes, but anything more than like a soft touch at that point could shake the person too much and move the death closer, and therefore we're very careful to be either extremely gentle with a person at this point, and certainly not to close their eyes, because it's like that flickering candle where a person touches that flame and could cause it to go out. Tanya was on the Brayso, Omer. Harotza she's atzmo enav shalmeis. Person wants to close the eyes of a dead person. In other words, fine. Nofeach lo yain bechotmo. They could blow wine into the corpse's nose. V'nos and shemen bein risa enav, apply oil between the corpse's eyelashes. V'oches b'shtei gudale raglav, and grab hold and squeeze the corpse's two big toes. V'mis atzmo me'alem, and they close on their own. The poskim don't talk about this. I'm not sure. This seems like if a person really does meaning even after waiting, a person doesn't want to close them directly, they could do this process. Practically speaking, halacha l'maisa, we wait a little while, even after a person's clear what we would describe as no longer living. We wait a little while before doing any of these things, and that is sufficient. Tanya, Stana Bryce, from Shem Omer. Tinok ben yomo chai mechalan of Shabbos. If a 1 day old baby is alive, is 1 day old baby, we desecrate Shabbos for this baby. However, you have someone as holy as David HaMelech, and he died, we don't desecrate Shabbos for him at all. In other words, we don't do anything for him if he's no longer living, right? We're distinguishing over here between the value of life, and so whereas a living 1 day old, as opposed to someone who is dead. Tinoka ben yomo chai mechalan es Shabbos amr Torah chalav Shabbos echad kedish yishmor Shabbos harbe. A 1 day old baby we profane Shabbos for. Why? Because we say let's profane this one Shabbos so that in the future the child would grow and be able to perform many Shabbosos. In other words, there's a calculus over here. It's better to profane one Shabbos so that in the future they will be able to observe other Shabbosos. David Melech Yisrael meis, whereas David, King David Melech, if he dies, since he will no longer be able to do mitzvahs in the future, therefore we are not Mechal Shabbos. And Rabbi Yochanan, I'm counted among the dead who are free. What does it mean, dead who are free? There's no longer mitzvahs. Now it's worth noting, we do not pass like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Why? Because Rav Shimon Gamliel is saying the only reason we desecrate Shabbos for someone is that in the future they will be able to keep Shabbos. Okay, so what about someone who is, whatever, they're either at the end of their life, or someone who is already, mentally incompetent or whatever it is? Do we not desecrate Shabbos? The answer is, Rav Shimon Gamliel would seemingly say, only for someone who, through being Mechal Shabbos this Shabbos, you're going to be able to ensure they observe future Shabbosos. That's what Mechal Shabbos for. We don't pass like that. We say no. V'chai Bahem and other Gemaras that basically point out anyone who is alive, regardless of their mitzvah observance, we are Mechal Shabbos to ensure that they live. Even if we're going to allow them to live even for an extra moment, that is something we would desecrate Shabbos for, because that is the sanctity of life, intrinsic, independent of mitzvos, is something that we would desecrate Shabbos for because of the sanctity of life. Period. Okay, and that's based on v'chai b'hem. And so we do anything at all independent. Our value, and right, it's just an important takeaway. Rav Shmuel Gamliel is saying our value comes from our mitzvah observance, which is certainly true. But the other opinion, which we pass like, is that our value comes from even independent of our mitzvah observance, even independent of our mitzvah performance. Our value is intrinsic, and therefore we do anything to ensure our existence. Okay. The Tanya Now we just similar distinctions between live and dead. A day-old child, we don't have to guard it from being bitten by a weasel or mice because they're afraid of living beings. But Og Melech Habashan, who is mighty and powerful and large, we have to protect him from weasels and mice. In other words, once a person's dead, then the animals are no longer afraid. They start, they're no longer afraid. And the pasuk says, Hashem says, the animals will fear and dread you. That's only as long as you're alive. That's then your fear is over creatures. Once a person dies, the fear ceases. Amra Papa, Naktinan Arye Abe Trey Lo Nafil. We have a tradition that a lion does not attack a pair of people. Haka Chazina Nafil. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? We see the lion does attack two people. Who could Rami Bar Amma? A wild beast is not able to attack a person until the person appears like an animal. As for man, in glory he shall not, rest. He is ruled when he appears like animals to an animal. Okay, in other words, animals will only attack us when we join the animal kingdom. When we act in an animalistic fashion, in a bestial fashion, then we do not have the promise of Hashem to watch over us. When we act in a refined and holy fashion, then there is this extra fear and dread. But when we, as individuals, as a society, basically stop acting like in a refined fashion, then there is nothing. Then the animals see us as part of the animal kingdom, and we don't have that extra divine protection. Okay. Amrav Chanina, Asr Lisham Vayisechidi. It is forbidden to sleep alone in a house. Achazato Lilis. Whoever sleeps alone in a house will be seized by Lilith. Okay, so Lilith is not just is found in many Jewish sources. Okay, so this is actually pasuk in halacha. Let's unpack this a little bit. There are different opinions about this. First of all, is this relevant to only men? Lilith, in other contexts, is seen as someone who seduces men, basically causes them to sin, and that's something which would be would only be for men. Many poskim would say it's both for men and women. Basically, when a person's on their own, there is more susceptibility to sin, and therefore they should not sleep on their own. There's a discussion about, so again, for both men and women, there's a discussion about, is this true? Let's say the other people in the house, is this only, you can't sleep alone in a house or sleeping alone in a room? There's some poskim who say, even if you're alone in your room, you should keep your door open a little bit. Most poskim don't pass in that way. So for those of you who like to close your door, you're good to go. But they say if a person is sleeping alone, there should be a little bit of light. There are some poskim say, whatever, the poskim say ideally there should be a tiny bit of light in one's room, and that alleviates this concern that's brought in this Gemara. So if a person is on their own, they should, whether it's like a little bit light coming from the hallway or some other tiny lights, that would be sufficient to the post must be about like a fire being like a person, and that for whatever reason impacts this shade. But that is brought down by many poskim. And okay, yeah.
Are you saying it's usher to sleep alone in your house?
I am saying that there are poskim who say that it's usher to sleep alone in your house, and there are poskim who say that the only way to do it is to put a light. It's brought down by many poskim. Yeah.
What do single people do?
Okay, so again, you have this idea of a little bit of a light, and that would be sufficient. You have to keep a light on if I sleep alone, if I'm home alone, I'll try to keep the door open, and I'll try to keep a light on somewhere not too far, so I have a little bit of light coming in. Sorry. Oh, not familiar with their tagline, but I hear probably should not be sleeping in Motel 6 for a lot of reasons. Sounds like Lilith's home. Okay, okay, sorry. Okay, Vitanya. Okay, let's talk about this. Sorry. Okay, Rosh Hashanah ben Elazar Omer. Aseh ad she'ata motze. Perform chesed and charity while you can still find someone to receive it from you. Well, you still can find someone to receive it from you, umatzlacha, and while you still have money, va'odcha biyadcha, and you still have control while you're still alive. Like, in other words, don't say I'm going to give it in the future, right? Some people say I'm waiting until I'm 119 because I might be living in assisted living for whatever X amount of years, and it's expensive. It is expensive, and you should save money. Don't get me wrong, but basically, don't push these things off because A, you have to be in a position of giving, and we may not always be in a position of giving, as the Gemara is going to discuss. B, you might not be in a position of giving, you might not have what to give, and we don't live forever. So therefore, it's important to go ahead and catch these opportunities while we still can. Shlomo said in Koheles, Remember Hashem in the days of your youth before the evil days come. What does it mean? What are the evil days? Old age. Okay, old age. Basically, serve Hashem. Don't ever push things off because it gets there's more challenge to serve Hashem in old age. The Mepharshim point out two things. One, as we'll see in the Gemara later on, we don't know, our financial status changes. Financial status changes. We don't know how long we're able to be giving, so therefore give now while we know we can. And second of all, the Mepharshim also speak about this pasuk in the context of our passions. In other words, when we're young, we have energy, we have desires for doing things, and when we get older, the challenge is diminished in some ways because the person doesn't have that same energy, and therefore it's critical we show Hashem. It's very nice when a person is 100, I'm not running off to do sin. Shkayach, you can't run anywhere. You can barely move, right? So, okay, we should all be well. We should all be able to move at 100. But the point is that it's not. There's not much of a kunz, right? The younger we are, the more energy, the more passion, the more anger, whatever, all those different intense, energies. We want to show Hashem we care, we serve you, and to be able to control those while we're still young is critical. Okay, and the years arrive of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. So now the Gemara says, what does that mean? The years of which I'll have no pleasure? It's a reference to Mashiach. Okay, this is Rav Shimon Lazar speaking. Because Mashiach there will be no opportunity to acquire merit or liability. Okay, so Rav Shimon Lazar is of the opinion that in the times of Mashiach there is no challenge. There's no challenge. In other words, Mashiach is just bliss. Mashiach is just a time when there is basically either highly diminished or no fight between good and evil, and therefore, whereas basically Hashem's saying, serve me now, because there's going to be a time called Mashiach. Even in the best case scenario, Mashiach's going to come. Great. There's no more movement at that point because basically there's no challenge. Without the challenge, there's no reward. If it's just served to you on a silver platter, and therefore serve Hashem now while you still have challenges. Says the Gemara, Pliga to Shmuel, this brisa which said that there's going to be, seemingly there's no poverty, there's no opportunity for tzedakah, there's also no challenges, that disagrees with Shmuel. Shmuel, Ein bein olam hazeh lemos Mashiach, el shibud malchus bilvad. There's no difference between this world and Mashiach, except for the fact that we will not be ruled over by foreign kingdoms. Shmuel says, look, the pasuk says, poor people will not cease to exist within the land. Okay, so you have a fundamental debate about the nature of Mashiach, and this is a major debate about, is Mashiach the supernatural time when there's miracles abound and our struggle between good and evil is highly diminished or almost non-existent, or is it a time where things are basically normal, just that there's Jewish sovereignty, right? But it's a natural world, the natural inclinations. It'll be easier, obviously, if we don't have the external threats of anti-Semitism, etc., but it's not going to have that same. But it's not a supernatural world. Okay, the Rambam quotes Shmuel, as you can imagine, but many others go with the more supernatural approach. The Rambam also writes in one of his letters about Mashiach, he says, I forget his letter is one of his instructions, I forget, but basically he says, in Judaism, whereas just to contrast, in the Catholic Church, the beliefs are very, very fundamental. There's dogmas, you have to know exactly what they hold. In Judaism, we have a general belief in reward and punishment. We believe that there's Chiyas HaMesim, we believe that there is a world or era of Mashiach, we believe there's a world to come. The details, he says, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's a principle that there is justice in the world, and we live in a world where we don't always see justice. We believe that Hashem is ultimately going to present justice to us. There will be a time, anyone who suffered over here, it's not meaningless. Maybe in this world you may not appreciate it, we may not appreciate it, but in the world to come, in Mashiach, in those future eras we will. That is our belief. In terms of the details, lo mishaneh. It doesn't impact, it's exciting as, but to think about maybe, but it doesn't really have a true impact on our lives, and therefore he says, it's probably not the best place and time to put extensive energy because the details don't impact our day-to-day living. Okay. Tanya was talking to Bryce of Lazar, Kapar Omer, a person should ask mercy regarding poverty. Shemhulova, because if the person does not become poor, if I don't become poor, I'm not going to say in the first person, but if a person does not become poor, babino, it's going to come to their child. If the child does not become poor, ben benoba, their grandchild will certainly become poor. In other words, the Gemara here is saying, within 3 generations, poverty will certainly hit. Because of this matter. Biglal, what is the word biglal? It's a wheel. Poverty is a wheel. Sometimes a person's, you go up, you go down. A person doesn't stay in that socioeconomic status forever, and even if they do, it's going eventually eventually has a trickle-down effect for the children. Of course, as tefillah, and bless you, it doesn't, it's not inevitable, but the point is that this is the natural course of life, that there's an up and a down, and things don't remain in the status quo. Amar Rav Yosef, Naktinan Hait Sorba Merabban Lo. We have a tradition, the young Torah scholars not become poor. Ask the Gemara, what are you talking about? We see they're come poor, right? It's because they do not go around begging at the doors. Okay, the different ways of understanding this, but one way of understanding this is that even though they become poor, they do not have to go from door to door. So what does that mean? The way it's understood is that, the way some understand it is that they are beloved, or certainly where Rav Yosef lived, scholars were, and this changes over time, unfortunately, better or worse, worse. But basically, in his time, scholars were an elevated part of society, and therefore, if they were poor, people would be looking out for them, right? People would be looking out for them, and therefore, they would not be even if they would become poor, they would not be forced to go from door to door because people, proactively would be ensuring their well-being. Okay. Amalei Rav Chia Visu. Rav Chia said to his wife, Ki asi anya, when a poor person comes to the door, actimele rifta, quickly offer him bread. Why? Ki heichli diliktamu livnech, so that others will be quick to offer bread to your children when they become beggars. Amrle, she said to him, Melat kalaylahu, are you cursing us? What are you doing? Wait, so you're saying give them bread because when we're poor, when our children are poor, they're going to feed us. Why are you cursing us? Amrle, he responds by the price we just learned, Kra kaksiv. He quotes the pasuk, Kibilal hadavar zeh, because of this matter. It is a revolving wheel, and sooner or later, people in our family will inevitably, he says, become poor. So the pasuk says he will bestow upon you compassion and show compassion to you and multiply you. What does this mean? He'll bestow compassion on you, show compassion to you. The repetitiveness in this pasuk, anyone who has compassion, anyone who is sensitive to other people, then Hashem will have compassion to you. A person who is not compassionate to others, Hashem will not have compassion on such a person. Okay, then we go back to the psukim that from Koheles that refers to a person either in their passing or in their deterioration of old age. Before the sun and the light grow dark. What does that refer to? A reference to the forehead and nose. They start to, the forehead starts to crease. The nose stops working so well. The moon is a reference to the soul diminishing. The stars reference the cheeks start to diminish. The clouds return after the rain is a reference to a person's eyesight. That when we cry, our eyesight gets diminished. Okay, Amar Shmuel says something about eyes and age. Hai dima, weeping. Ad arbim shnin hadra. Until 40 years old, when a person cries, it just returns. Okay? Mikan ve'elech, if you're older than 40, lo hadra, then the tears don't return. Our eye starts to diminish, right? Meaning, whether we talk about tears or not, but we know that once we hit 40, then your eye doctor will tell you, then, come in for more checks, because that's when you typically, this is like the bifocal stage, for those of us. Amrav Nachman, okay, hai kochala, eye salve, which is something we use to heal, to treat eyes. Ad arbim shnin maviach. Until 40 years, it improves one's eyesight. Even if you apply a tremendous amount of this salve, like filling a weaver's beam, a large amount, okme mokim, it merely maintains your eyesight, but it doesn't improve it, right? Once we have 40, then eyesight is deeply impacted. Mike Mashlam is teaching us by saying, like, as much as the weaver's beam, that the thicker the dabber, the thicker the eye salve, the better it is. Okay, that's why he says, like, even if you do this much, because he's saying that doing a lot typically is very helpful. Okay. Rabbi Chanina Shchiva la Barte. Rabbi Chanina's daughter died. Lo havekabachile. He wasn't crying. Amrle Devisu, his wife said to him, Tani Golta, Apikas mi Pesach, did a chicken die? What's wrong with you? Why aren't you crying? Okay, I love the way they talk to each other. Amala, he said to him, Tichla vivara tarte. Tichli vivara, do you want me to lose two things? Do you want me to lose my children and my eyesight? He says, I'm an old man. If I cry, it's gonna cause me to go blind. Savarla Kihad Amar Yochel Mishum Rav Yosef ben Katzarta. Sheshmo saying there are 6 types of tears. Shalosh Yafas, Shalosh Rose. There are 3 that are good, 3 that are bad. Shal Asham Shal Bechi, tears induced by smoke or by crying over one's sorrows and misfortunes. Vishal Besak Kisei, and stomach pains in the bathroom. Stomach pains. Rose, those are bad for the eyes. Shal Sam, Shal Schok, Shal Peros. By either tears caused by medicine, by laughter, or by produce like onions. Yafos, they are good for the eyes. We'll pick up tomorrow. Have a great day.